Is there any other public comment that hasn't been covered on this item? Cynthia?
I am Cynthia Kennedy, and I live in the Virginia City Highlands. I really don't have statements or comments to make. What I have are a few questions, and I'm not making these in an adversarial state at all. It's just that there are questions that I think a lot of people here and also people in the county would like to have answered. First of all, I'm wondering if the high costs of having a pro tem during Annette Daniels' situation on the bench was because of her husband's illness. Is that why there were such high costs in having a pro tem, because she had to be away to care for her husband? Or is this a usual thing that you're going to have a pro tem on the bench quite often?
You know, if I could observe, because I have some experience with this down in Carson City. I was a judge pro tem when I was a private lawyer down in Carson City. The Carson City Justice Municipal Court uses pro tems whenever the judges are disqualified, and that would usually happen if, say, for instance, somebody was appearing in front of them that they knew or were related to or something like that. They go on vacations, they have to attend. Judge McGuffey is going to have to spend 3-4 weeks probably in a judicial college, so there's a number of instances where the justice of the peace is going to be absent, but the court business has to go on. So that's why the legislature passed this judge pro tem statute, and just as an observation, this isn't as much as an honor as it is a public service. I, in private practice, typically would make $1,000, $1,200 a day. I only got paid $150 a day to be a judge pro tem. So it was always a sacrifice for me to do it, and I eventually quit, not because of the sacrifice, just because I didn't like doing it. But there's lots of reasons why a justice of the peace would be absent so that a judge pro tem or senior justice of the peace is needed to perform the functions of the justice of the peace. Does that answer your question?
Yes, but respectfully, there are not many of us in this room who make $1,000 a day anymore. So in your case, taking away from your practice and serving on the bench, that was very kind and generous of you to do that. But your situation in being a justice pro tem is a little different from the ordinary Storey County citizen. The other question I have is, was Annette Daniels asked if she would serve as justice pro tem, because in her case, even though she's a superior judge, there would not be travel and hotel expenses incurred. Was Annette Daniels asked?
I believe I can speak.
Oh, go ahead.
Just getting up to close to the mic so it can be recorded. Yes, in fact, Annette and I had several conversations. She, before this came about, she indicated to me that she would be the first to call, just for the reasons that I wouldn't have to pay 70 mileage to drive up from Carson or Silver Springs. Okay, but she's still a senior judge, and she's entitled to senior judge compensation wage. Justice of the peace is almost half that. That's what the bottom line is. I'm trying to save the county taxpayers money here.
Because she's a superior judge, though, would her expertise lend itself to procedures in court perhaps moving a little more swiftly than someone who is not experienced at that job?
I don't see that kind of problem.
What about people who might say, I would really like to waive my right to be seen in front of, let's say, Judge Miller and wait for someone else? Could that possibly cause a logjam?
No,
I don't perceive that happening with Justice Daniels.
I addressed that.
Yeah.
If this room did not want to go before
Right.
Miller, they can tell the court they don't want to do that. They would rather wait and move their court date out till I'm there.
And so Annette did say she did not want to do the job.
No, I didn't say that.
Oh, okay. Then
No,
what did?
She's there if I need her.
So Annette could be the justice pro tem.
That's what she is automatically. Any senior judge is still active. I can call any senior judge her.
Well, I'm just imagining that if you have to go to school, like you're going to go to school in April, to learn how to be a justice of the peace, and this is nothing disparaging about Jim Miller, but with Jim Miller, even though he has been a sheriff and has a career in law enforcement, it's still not the same as serving on the bench. So I know in my case, if I was going in front of a judge, I would much rather be in front of someone experienced like Annette than someone less experienced like Jim Miller.
There's arguments there. That would be your preference.
Right.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound arrogant. It is now my court.
Right.
I would be your judge, not Annette, or whoever, because you like Annette better.
Well,
You would have to come before me.
I have,
The staff is directed to save the money. They're the ones who picked the pro temps, the lowest bidder to speak of. The one we've been using is Judge Johnson. He doesn't charge us mileage, but he does charge as soon as he leaves the door, the front door. So that's where we're at. This is all about saving money. It's not about who's better than one judge better than the next. A pro temp is going to have the same training as I do. There's not a problem.
well, I have a number of questions here, so I'll move on. My other question was, were the other applicants asked, the other Justice of the Peace applicants?
I'm sorry.
You had mentioned that preferably it would be the better job for someone who wasn't employed, let's say who were retired, but some of these other applicants for JP are retired or have their own businesses and their time is flexible, perhaps? Were they asked if they would want to be Justice Pro Tem?
I believe, go to the county manager and ask to have their name put on the list as a potential candidate, I guess.
But there never was a list.
Well, I don't know what people were on that list personally. They kind of kept that away.
The applicants for JP, there was no public list of people who had applied for the job?
The applicants for JP, yes. There was a staff report that contained 7 names, I believe, and I'll disclose almost all of them. I forget
Because
one, I think I'll
I'm getting a little confused here. On the one hand, you're saying these people could have applied for pro tem, but on the other hand, you said Jim Miller ran into you when you were at Community Chest donating clothing and was interested in the
Okay,
job.
Can I,
You lost track.
excuse me a second, Judge, can I intercede for a second? Learning curve for all of us, but I understand the judge's concern about the cost of a senior judge. I also understand the concern that if Jim Miller became a judge, somebody not wanting to appear before him and asking to appear before someone else. I've also scoured through NRS and see that at the county's action, we can actually have more than one pro tem, of course. And that may be something that is a good idea, that we actually open up 4 more pro tems in case a situation, if Jim Miller does become a pro tem judge and someone has to appear before him, that there's a list.
Would those people have to be trained
Yes.
at the county expense?
I don't know.
And what would that expense compare to having, say, Annette on the bench who would not have to be trained?
I think if you want to volunteer your services to be appointed, then you would probably have to ask the committee.
So I'm a business owner, and I am not computing this very well in my head. Maybe my math skills are not too great, but what does the justice school cost?
I have no idea.
Yeah, we're getting
The county
off-
is paying for that. We should know what we're paying.
We are getting off the topic a little bit, but I do know that...
Well, I can move on here if you'd like.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Jack.
When you were considering the Justice Pro Tem, surely, was there not someone who would draw a bit less controversy than Jim Miller?
Well, let me comment on that, Cynthia. The only name that's on our agenda today is James Miller, and it's a simple question of yes or no, should we or should we not appoint Jim Miller. To bring up any other names at this point would be totally off the agenda.
But I think that's what people had a problem with, though, was the procedure and the way this was done. Mr. McGuffey, or Justice McGuffey, rather, mentioned the other people in law enforcement that were or justice of the peace in other counties who had had careers in law enforcement, but I wondered if their backgrounds had been as controversial as Mr. Miller's. And also, these justices of the peace were elected, they weren't appointed, so people at least had the opportunity to not vote for them if they had a problem with them. I also wondered why Jim Miller's name was not on the agenda to begin with at the last meeting.
Does explain, Pat.
Yeah, I'll answer that one again. It was discussed at the last meeting. Historically, we have not listed specific assignments like that. In January of every year, we have probably close to 20 committee fills on the Fourth Ward School, the Tourism Authority. We make those assignments and appointments. We make assignments and appointments to the Planning Commission, and we just have never historically listed those names. That doesn't mean in retrospect that perhaps they shouldn't have, but that was really my call, my decision, and to be candid with you, I guess I wish I would have put it on there. It's always better to disclose more than less, but I was following past practice.
Well, my last experience for the Justice of the Peace being appointed was when Al Munday was told to vacate the premises or be charged with stealing documents from the county. He was the Justice of the Peace here back in 1987. And when the meeting was held by the county commissioners to appoint someone in Al Mundy's place, that was when Annette first came to the bench. She was Al Mundy's secretary, and she became Justice of the Peace. But there were quite a number of people who wanted that job as Justice of the Peace. Now, I know as far as the Planning Commission and some of these other appointments, I think they go begging most times to find someone who's generous enough to take the time to go to those meetings and fill those positions. But as far as Justice of the Peace, whether you're appointed as the justice, as Mr. McGuffey has been, or a judge pro tem, I think there's a great amount of interest in that position, and it's something that the citizens of the county would want to know in advance what the county commission was considering. My last question is, why was Mark Phillips treated so badly at the last meeting? I feel he was speaking for many at that last meeting, and that people really did not like his treatment. Why wasn't he just allowed to have his say? That wasn't a very long meeting, and I saw that Jerry Antonaro had to come and ask him to sit down because you asked him to stop. But why wasn't he just given the time to speak his piece?
We obviously felt he was.
He did?
No, we did.
How would you know? You're not him.
No, but I was sitting here.
Our First Amendment right is very important to all of us. And I think when a meeting, I can understand if a meeting has gone on for hours and there are many people who want to speak, that people have to abbreviate their comments. But in this case, I believe that meeting lasted about a half an hour. And I thought Mark Phillips had some pertinent things to say. And I really thought it looked bad. If the county is going to have a video system and be televising these meetings, one thing I don't understand is why we see the backs of your heads and not your faces. That's great. I'm glad you've corrected that, because it was a little difficult to ascertain who was speaking. But one person whom we could see and who we could hear was Mark Phillips. And I really wanted to hear what he had to say in its entirety, and I don't think he would have gone on for that much longer before he would have finished with what he had to say without being asked to step down. So with that, I'll step down.
Thank you, Cynthia. Is there any... Thank you.